Hey everyone, and welcome. So, most of us know the story of Pygmalion, right? Or, its famous musical version, My Fair Lady. It's that classic, totally charming tale of a flower girl from the streets who gets transformed into the super sophisticated lady. But what if there's a much darker, much more political story hiding just under the surface?
Because you see, when you start to look at this play through a post-colonial lens, something really fascinating and, honestly, pretty troubling starts to emerge. The story of Eliza Doolittle's transformation, it starts to look a lot less like a romantic comedy and a whole lot more like the story of an empire.
Okay, so before we dive into the whole empire thing, let's just do a quick recap of the story we all think we know. On the surface, the plot's pretty simple. Henry Higgins, this brilliant phonetics professor, he makes a bet that he can take a poor Cockney flower girl, Eliza, and pass her off as a duchess, just by changing the way she talks.
But here's where the real genius of George Bernard Shaw's play kicks in. The power dynamic, between the upper-class professor and the working-class girl, it perfectly mirrors the relationship between a colonizing power and its subjects. The play basically becomes a tiny version of the entire British Empire.
So, let's do it. Let's re-examine this story through that framework of imperialism, where all these familiar characters suddenly take on some very new and very different roles.
Okay, so think about it like this. Higgins, he's the colonizer. Eliza, she's the native subject. The slums of the East End, that's the colony. And the weapon that's used to conquer her, the English language itself. The whole process, it's not really education. It's what they called a civilizing mission.
And this is absolutely crucial. This central conflict, it isn't just about class, and it's not just about gender. Higgins, who represents the dominant, superior culture, sees it as his duty to remake Eliza, the inferior native, in his own image. This isn't a partnership, not at all. It's a conquest.
So how exactly does he do it? Well, let's look at the specific methods Higgins uses. And you'll see these aren't just teaching techniques. They are the exact tools an empire uses to assert its dominance over people.
You see, this was the core justification for the entire British Empire. This idea that they were doing a favor for savage cultures by replacing their traditions with British ones. And that is the exact same logic Higgins uses for his little experiment. He genuinely believes he's saving Eliza from herself. And just listen to the way he talks about her. He completely dehumanizes Eliza with the kind of language that colonial administrators would use to describe their subjects. By calling her a barbarian, he's framing his actions not as something cruel, but as something necessary, something righteous.
So what's his real weapon here? It's not just phonetics, it's the power of what we call linguistic imperialism. The basic idea is that to truly conquer a people, you first have to conquer their language. You have to convince them that their own way of speaking is illegitimate, that it's just wrong. And he follows this clear, three-step playbook of linguistic conquest. First, he labels her and her entire culture as inferior. Then, he works to completely wipe out her Cockney dialect. And finally, he imposes his own superior language, the Queen's English, as the only right way to speak.
And this whole desire for purification, well, it gets shockingly literal. When Higgins orders Eliza to be violently scrubbed clean and for her old clothes to be burned, it's this incredibly powerful metaphor for the colonial desire to wash away the dirt of a native culture before it can be considered acceptable. So he succeeds, right? What is the result of this whole violent transformation? Well, the answer and the tragedy lies in this post-colonial idea of mimicry.
Eliza becomes the perfect mimic. A post-colonial theorist named Homi Bhabha argued that when the colonized subject flawlessly imitates the colonizer, it exposes a really threatening truth, that cultural superiority isn't real. It's not innate. It's just a performance that anyone can learn.
And Eliza's performance is perfect. I mean, she doesn't just pass for a lady. People think she's an actual princess. But this success is deeply, deeply unsettling for Higgins's worldview. Because if a savage flower girl from the gutter can become royalty, then the entire social hierarchy he believes in, it's a total fraud.
But her success comes at this absolutely devastating cost. And you can hear it right here in this heartbreaking line. She's been successfully transformed, but into what? And for what? The project's over, and he's just left her behind.
What she's describing, that's the tragedy of cultural displacement.
She's been civilized right out of her old life, but she's never truly accepted into Higgins's world. She's culturally homeless, just stranded between two worlds, and she belongs to neither of them.
So, when you step back and look at all this, what's the real transformation that's happened here? Because it's not just in Eliza's accent or her dresses, it's in our entire understanding of the play itself.
At the end of the day, this way of reading Pygmalion shows us that it's so much more than a charming comedy. It's a really sharp critique of cultural arrogance. Higgins's great failure was treating Eliza's identity as something dirty that had to be scrubbed away, instead of just recognizing her humanity from the very beginning. He committed an act of cultural violence, and he left the stranded person in its wake.
So the next time you watch a classic story of transformation, ask yourself, who is being changed, who is doing the changing, and what is truly being lost in the process? You might just be surprised by the empires hiding in plain sight.